And HRO Today Global and HRO Today Magazine have been covering recognition in nearly every issue for 2017, and we completely understand the impact that it has on an organization. Just check out this research. Shows that 86% of employees feel recognition programs make them happier at work and 85% more satisfied. So of course that in turn affects retention, engagement, and productivity. So today we have a great panel that's going to take a deep dive into recognition and answer some of your questions as well. So we're going to do some brief intros. We'll start with Charles.
Hi, Charles Sherbaum. I'm the Chief Analytics Officer of Rideau.
Andy Stevenson, Group People Director of Lucas PLC.
Hi, Moitz Odometer, coming from an FMCG company from the South and Eastern Europe.
Peter Hart, the CEO of Rideau Recognition Solutions.
And I'm Steve Richardson, former Director of Recognition Programs. They didn't fire me at RBC Financial. I did retire in August.
Well, congratulations on that. So we'll just start with a real open-ended question, talking about some of the latest trends you guys are seeing in recognition, and just anyone jump in.
Okay, you're all looking at me. I don't know why.
Yes.
But, we actually met yesterday. Some of us hadn't met each other, and we chatted a little bit. And the biggest thing I think that I was seeing, I did my role for about 25 years at Royal Bank of Canada, and when we started, it was very much about recognizing employees, but gifting, and whatever type of gifting or cards it was. And we evolved out of that I guess the last 5 or 6 years, especially, realizing that it's really not about the gift, it's about how the manager is trained to do the recognition. And we have seen a lot of evidence, especially over the last few years, how that training, if you will, of the manager, of the people manager, to do it properly, meaningful, and specific, does make a difference, not only in how the recognition is received, but from a lot of work that we've done, tying it to employee opinion surveys, customer sat, but even the sales performance is tied directly to the recognition. So to me, that's certainly one of the trends that is evolving as we speak. So.
From my perspective, I think it's the realization that it's not about the tangible piece. To speak to Steve's point, just because you give somebody points or a gift card or a gold watch doesn't necessarily mean that you've recognized them. Recognition is a feeling, and the feeling is not me giving the gold watch to my employees, it's what they're feeling. Do they feel valued? Do they feel appreciated? Do they feel recognized? And I think that that's a trend that we're going to start seeing more and more. It's all about what they think. It's not what the employer thinks.
I would not say that the trends are not important, but I think what is more important than trends is actually what the company wants and at what stage in the life cycle the company is and what is the strategy, because depending on that you will probably choose completely different approaches to recognition. So of course there are trends that are going to this purpose and value add and well-being, and everybody of us in HR would like to follow that. But I think what is making the biggest impact or difference is that the HR together with the business really ask themselves, okay, what is it that differentiates us from the others, and what is it that we want to achieve, and then recognize exactly those things.
Right, so aligning it to core values and performance.
Yes.
Right. And I've also heard that when you mentioned the life cycle, some organizations are introducing recognition extremely early in the process, within 3 months of an employee coming on board. Is anyone else seeing that?
I think that recognition is something you want to see daily.
Yeah.
Never mind 3 months. I think it's ongoing.
It starts by choosing the employee. This is, one of the
Right.
biggest recognitions you get. You get an offer.
Right.
So in that sense, I would agree that it really starts even
Right, even on the
before.
onboarding, sure. Andrew?
Yeah, I think it's important that you want to create an organisation, employee culture that people feel they've been recognised just to actually get in the door. Certainly I know organisations where there's almost a desperation to hire people to fill vacancies, Whereas I actually want the exact opposite. I want people to feel a real sense of achievement when they actually manage to come in. And that is the initial recognition that, well done, you're here. And then that should follow all the way through. I'll just slightly flip back to the previous question in terms of trends. My career has been entirely in commission-based organisations.
Okay.
And one of the trends I've seen lately is that many people start to feel that's a dirty word now and you shouldn't reward people directly for sales.
Okay.
And for me, the two go hand in hand. I think recognition in a verbal way is important, recognition through incentive schemes is important, but we should never lose the sight of the direct motivational factor of hard cash, which is quite a useful thing to use. And I think as long as you get the blend right across all of the people, that can be really important. But I do think there's a trend to put that down and not want to talk about that too much.
Well, and I do think traditionally sales roles are motivated
Absolutely.
by that type of incentive, but looking at different roles,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
guess organizations are trying to figure out how to motivate those characteristics.
Of course.
And it can be challenging to figure out the perfect solution. Charles, did you have any things you're seeing?
Certainly we're seeing a much more focus on the manager as we move away from stuff and we start thinking about culture and a right mix of different solutions and tools available to managers, of really focusing on how do we make them effective at using the tools, delivering it. If we think about culture, that if managers are the people delivering the culture on a day-to-day basis, how do we equip them to be effective at interacting with employees and making sure they actually do feel appreciated and recognized no matter what tool we're using, whether it be compensation, the gold watch, or simple words of thank you, we appreciate you, welcome to our company, we're happy you're here, you deserve to be here.
And how would you go about measuring managers' performance at doing that?
I mean, there's a lot of ways. I mean, recognition at its core, if it's done right, the employee would have to feel recognized and appreciated. So almost measuring the managers from one way has to start with the employees, that if managers are saying the words but employees aren't feeling what the manager's tending to express, then it's not really effective recognition.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the traditional employee engagement survey has over the years attempted to do that. Of
Sure.
course, an annual survey is a pretty blunt instrument. That there are technological ways of doing it. There's various apps on the market that measure that now. We've taken the approach of we encourage all of our employees all the time in real time to rate us on the internet.
Okay.
So we make it very clearly available. We signpost Glassdoor, we signpost Indeed. I'm sure other products are available for those suppliers in the room. But we actively are saying to our people, literally all the time through all communications, whatever you think of our business, just go and put it out there in public straight away. And that gives you a real sense of what managers are doing because you just get it in real time. The manager is the most direct trigger of that feedback.
Right.
And I guess just building on that, we also, because we're a large company of 80,000, we do an annual employee opinion survey like I'm sure everyone else does. But one of the things we implemented was this feedback that the actual employees can rate their manager ongoing throughout the year. And a lot of our senior people are looking at that number very closely, saying that's a very valuable number, much to Andrew's point, that it gives you the real-time experience. The EOS survey is great. It may only happen once every 2 years, but to have that almost instantaneous feedback, and a lot of our senior folks are saying that having the employees rate their manager ongoing through the year, every time they log on to our system, is a very valuable thing.
And I think that specifically that gives you the opportunity to have actionable insights that you can actually do something with. So if employees are doing this, and especially in the context of a recognition program, you can identify the managers, all right, that are not getting it right, and you can make interventions with those managers. I mean, I've heard the word toxic manager. I don't think anybody starts off wanting to be a toxic manager or whatever. I think there's just people that don't understand how to use recognition as a strategic tool. And I think that goes back, probably to their childhood. It's a learned behavior. And I believe that it's something that you can learn. And I think it's incumbent upon companies to teach managers how to use this as a strategic tool. And I think that the surveys and things of that nature allow us to do that today.
I think one bit that is worth calling out is that we should remember the managers need recognition as well.
Right,
This
of
is
course.
exactly what we do, for example. Yeah.
In many cases, what they do to the frontline employee is a simple amplification of what happens in their world.
Right.
And if they're under pressure to do things, it's unlikely that they will respond in the opposite manner.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
it's very important people keep sight of that all the time.
I think it's a holistic thing. I think that recognition of feeling valued, feeling appreciated is just a human need. To be frank with you, I think you're absolutely right. It applies to everybody within the organization.
So what we, for example, try to do, because for us, after this big acquisition that happens, it was very important not only what was achieved, but how it was achieved. So all the employees, including the managers, have these people, let's call them KPIs, or measures by which they are evaluated, and then this reflects their, I don't know, career progression, salaries, bonuses, and almost everything that is related to rewards. But what is also, I would say, important, that we try to recognize out of those some kind of best people managers, the one that have a biggest number of their best people going abroad, or that you choose and take the best employers, or pick a topic that is of special interest in that period of year, and then try to recognize those. But what was found by us interesting, that people value most the peer recognition. So it was a need in the company to introduce some kind of evaluation or recognition that was coming from the colleagues, not only from the, let's call it, company or the corporate process.
Yeah, anyone else want to comment on social recognition coming from colleagues? I know that's grown immensely in the last few years.
I think that peer-to-peer recognition is really, there's a TED talk that Rainier Strack gave. He's the head of the Boston Consulting Group's global HR practice, and pay over 26 dimensions ranked number 8. Having a good relationship with your immediate manager was number 4. Good work-life balance, number 3. Having a good relationship with your colleagues was number 2. Being valued and appreciated was number 1. And this is somebody that's not specifically in the recognition rewards industry. Speaks volumes. And I think number 2, having a good relationship with your peers, this is where it ties in very closely to social recognition. And that's what a social recognition system, peer-to-peer, actually creates those bonds, creates those relationships. Because at the end of the day, it is all about relationships. In our personal lives, in our professional lives, it's all about relationships.
I know, full disclosure, Dr. Scherbaum does analyze our data. And Charles, I know this is one of the biggest levers we can pull in the organization. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, it's really interesting when we think about the idea of more rewards focused versus more social, non-monetary, just peer recognition. Depends on the outcomes you want to drive. So in the work we've done with Steve, we find that social recognition is one of your best leading indicators of service climate. So particularly if you have a retail type environment, you're trying to improve the environment around customer service. Social recognition is a little bit better than the tangible. Looking at customer satisfaction data, looking at employee engagement. However, if you want to look at sales metrics, it's more of those reward focused that tend to be a little heavier. So it's nice when we think about a trend of picking the right program to drive the right outcome. So if we're trying to make a strategic change around service in our organization, there's programs that you can implement that would be more effective at that. Whereas if you're really focused on sales, there's different programs. And so really a whole wide range of tools that managers and senior leaders can effectively use to drive the right outcome.
Yeah, I don't think that one size fits all. It's a little bit like a surgeon. You have a scalpel, scissors, and a saw. And they all cut.
Where are you going with this?
They all cut. But you sure wouldn't want to see your cardiovascular surgeon coming with a saw. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. So different programs. One size does not fit all.
Yeah.
Different programs, okay, drive different solutions.
Yeah.
And Andrew, do you see any social at your organization? Have you considered it?
Yeah, no, we use social recognition. We use it in various different contexts. I guess similar to what everyone else has already said, it depends on the context. But actually, I'd go 2 ways. It's one, what you're trying to drive, but it's also acknowledging that we don't have quite as many people, but in 9,000 people, there is groups that are motivated in very, very different ways. And so it's about having a variety of items available. So we do have very simplistic peer-to-peer recognition where you get a simple thank you. We have very small awards. And then we have up to, taking 300-400 people away on 5-star breaks where they take their family. Right. And it is having a blended mix of all the different manners of recognition so that you can use the one appropriate to the business objective you're trying to hit, but also use the one that's appropriate to the employee that you're trying to motivate, because everyone has very different drivers.
I would give, since this is called the best practice in recognition, one small example that we used, and that was actually inspired by a brand of chocolates. I saw before Christmas in Vienna, they opened a shop, and you could enter into the shop and take a box of chocolates, and instead of paying a price, you opened the chocolate box, and there was a task. You had to do something nice for somebody that you care for, and this was the only price that you paid. And then we took this as a teaser, and then during the Christmas time, in addition, you usually have these parties and packages but we introduced something that we call Share a Smile. So we implemented a small boxes that was carrying each of our values, and inside of the boxes there was a small task that you could choose if you want to do to a colleague. Write a poem, buy them a breakfast, bring a cup of tea, or I don't know, sing a song. Or there were different small tasks, and people could do this if they chose, and they could put the photos and message on our intranet and pages. And the reaction to these activities was really incredible.
Right,
and it was small. It was small in budget, it was small in time, it was small in implementing. But Share a Smile became one of the most famous activities in the company, and it was just like that. So
it caught on quick.
Yes,
right?
it did. It was about that feeling that you do something nice for your colleagues.
I think one of the interesting things that Andrew mentioned, one of the conferences that I used to do in my day job involved a commission sales force, and this was very high earners. The conferences were important. There were a lot about training and educating, but really the big thing, even though they were taken to a lovely spot and had 3 or 4 days with their significant other, I think the important thing that we learned over time was that if we didn't have the recognition piece built in, we were missing something. So even, we would have the CEO there, we would have the vice chairs there, all the top C-suite folks. They would have time to meet with them, have dinner with them, have social outings with them. And during a lot of our feedback in our surveys, this kept popping up about how much they enjoyed this, because it wouldn't be something in a 80,000 person company that you could do every day. So it's something that we didn't expect out of the high-end group, but it was something, once we understood what recognition meant to them, it was more than just going to a nice trip or whatever. You still needed that recognition piece to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd echo that. In a former company of mine, we would take our high performers to a dinner with the CEO, with the COO. We'd actually have the department heads, which was quite entertaining, because people from the front line could air all their complaints about how the company was going. But it was fantastic, and again, that was recognition. But the buy-in that got from people for the comparatively little effort and cost.
Sure.
That it took was absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And there's research that shows this. There's a Dr. Gary Chapman wrote a book called Love Languages. It's a very famous book. It sold like millions of copies. He teamed up with a gentleman, Dr. Paul White, and wrote Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. How do employees want to be recognized, appreciated, valued? They found 46% was words. That's how they wanted to be appreciated, either written or orally or whatever. Speaking to your point, 36% wanted to have one-on-one time with their immediate manager. Less than 10% actually chose tangible gifts, tangible awards. And I think that a lot of companies are actually speaking to their employees in the wrong language and wasting a lot of reward dollars when what they ought to be doing is educating their managers about how to get this right. Only 13% of managers in North America receive any recognition training. And I think that speaks volumes. You go into an organization, they teach you about a lot of different skills and things that you need, but they don't necessarily teach you how to deal with your employees. And I think that we need to change that.
One bit I'd just say, we added over the last year a very specific recognition program just for HR. Because it is actually ironic that we should be the champions of this and we should lead it. And the number of times that I've seen either HR aren't included, or there's kind of an unwritten rule that because we run the schemes, we don't enter our people into any of those programs.
Really good point.
And so we've just put a specific standalone program that's just for our people to get them used to it, so that they can take that advocacy out into the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, so once they experience it, they want to
Absolutely,
share it,
they want to share the concept rather than the fact that they've been recognised or received anything. They you know, there was actually conversations in a canteen between functions talking about, oh, what did you do? You went on a away day. What did you have? Why did you have that recognition? Is that important? And people were going, yeah, it's focused us as a team. It's zeroed us in on the business objectives that we have, and actually, you guys should do it. And that's a really powerful way of spreading the message.
So we've talked a little bit about some KPIs for managers and how they're doing. So it can be challenging to measure recognition programs. I mean, there's been a lot of positive feedback. Employees enjoy it. Employees use the program. But there are any other recommendations you would have for measuring your program?
I think okay that we're all familiar with CRM systems within an organization. I think that actually, when you think about it, you could actually use the recognition data to fuel what we call ERM systems, employee relationship management systems. And there's a lot of science behind this now. And there are ways of gathering that data and analyzing it, parsing it. This is what Charles specializes at in terms of determining, okay, what a manager's abilities are in terms of delivering the messaging to employees. And you know, we've all heard you join a company and you quit your manager. But it's actually, I believe it's a little bit different. I think you're firing your manager. That there's no amount of money that's going to keep me working for that person. And I'm either transferring out of the department or I'm transferring out of the company. And again, we have to be able to identify those managers that are causing people to leave, to disengage, to underperform. And what we have to do is serve up educational content to those managers, make interventions with them to help them become better at that. And Charles, I mean, you could speak a little bit better.
I mean, certainly usage is important, but I love the story of the boxes because that was a transformative experience for a lot of employees in terms of how they saw the organization, how they interacted with each other. And so there has to be something from their perspective, because it's great if we have all these automated tools that are online and managers can use it, but it doesn't necessarily replace the impact of the human connection, which is what recognition ultimately is about. And so some ways of gathering that kind of input, because there might be a lot of managers who are fantastic at recognizing, but never touch a tool or a solution or a program or a piece of technology. They walk up to somebody and say, thank you, what you did was important, it made this difference, and this is why. So having both of those perspectives is really key in a systematic way of gathering the employee's perspective on it.
But I think just to throw in the opposite space, so data is important and science is fantastic. You should always, if you go and ask whoever is your frontline HR person, whether you've got HR business partners or advisors or on-site managers, just go and ask your frontline HR people. They'll know which managers do it and which managers don't. But they'll know instantaneously, and whether it's a gut feel or whether it's being on the site or whatever. Actually, in that case, I think science can reinforce the message if you want to do something about it. But if you just want to know who does this and who doesn't, you can do that exercise incredibly quickly.
You're absolutely right. I know that one of our other banking clients, not RBC, we were talking about, you know, the fact that that managers are often the cause, okay, of stress, burnout, etc. And the theory about it and the science behind it, the person say, yeah, I can tell you which ones are doing this. Absolutely, yeah.
And Mort, so you've done some research on that as well, haven't you?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I think I have a split personality disorder because I truly believe that the best way is actually that you spend time with people and you get the vibes. So in that sense, there is nothing to add. But since I was always kind of interested in making a point and proving that something has a direct or indirect effect, we do play a lot with predictive analytics and with all of these fancy artificial intelligence tools. And we do try to connect what is the evaluation of the manager's leadership competencies has on the performance of the team, on the fluctuation of the team, on all of these measures. And we did make a connection between the engagement level and the business results, statistically significant. And we did calculate what are the characteristics of the managers that will make somebody leave faster than what it should be a normal tenure on a certain position. And we do cooperate in these projects with IT and with external partners. And we do have a people analytic person who is specialized in that. But I would always, if I had to choose between the two, I would always go for this vibe and the thing that you get when you spend the time on the floor. But these other things are, I would say, important to have them.
Right, so, there's been a lot of linkage from recognition to engagement and productivity and retention, but what are some of those measurements that you would suggest measuring or getting data from to prove it to the C-suite that this is a worthwhile program, or if you're looking to grow the program or roll it out globally?
We've done a couple things. I mean, one is that we've tried to blend both the pieces of how do you capture the managers who are going around and making the personal connections and having a real impact on employees. How are other managers who might be using the tools and solutions as their means of doing it? Not everybody. I'm a very introverted person, so sometimes the tools and solutions are preferable. Other people are very extroverted and they would rather not touch the computer but interact with the human being. And so we've tried to blend those to come up with indices that allows us something closer to a performance management metric. So in a large organization where we don't necessarily have the capacity to walk around or necessarily get to each HR frontline person who can easily tell us who's good and who's not good, of having some sense of at least a common metric, then we can cut across business lines, functions, levels to say, here are the people that tend to be growing and getting better at this over time, here's not. Because it's one thing to find out who's good or not, but it's if you're not good, what's going to happen over time? Are you going to improve and get better at it so you're not creating negative relationships? So part of it is to have something actually to use on the recognition side.
We did an interesting, so besides these usual KPIs, regretted turnover, evaluation of leadership competencies, the engagement scores, and all of this, we did, just for the sake of curiosity, looked at not the results of 360, but which were the people that were nominated as assessor the most. And then we also compared this with which were the people that were chosen to participate in the projects that you could choose people to. So we made these kind of informal social networks that kind of revealed to us who were most liked managers, who was most often nominated to be the project manager, and who were the most or the biggest contributor in the project. And then you compare this evaluation with, this, let's call them formal, usual KPIs, and sometimes you get really different results. And then we usually use this to dig deeper and do the analysis, okay, what is happening? Why do we have differences? But this was something that was maybe a little bit different than the usual KPIs of proving that the good manager is doing a good job.
I think you need the whole picture too, because employee opinion surveys are critical. We all run them, but I think it's looking beyond. Look beyond the next, the obvious question. Because I'll use an example of an executive, I guess, junior executive in our company that had been rated, fairly poorly in that, and couldn't figure it out. But the answer was much like we've been talking about for the last half hour, is that it wasn't personal. So, the ratings sometimes can come out good or bad, and I think it's critical to just, take a second and go beneath that. What is driving that, either good or bad, to determine, because I think a lot of times, I know in our EOS survey, it was a lot about, you know, are people feeling recognized? And that question has only been in the last couple of years. Prior to that, it was just, does our company have a good recognition program? And it's so, that could mean anything to anyone. And recognition to some people, especially in a commissioned or in a sales organization, could mean money. Well, that's not my world, but that's somebody else's world. So I think you need to make sure you're thinking and asking the right questions as far as what that survey tells you, and is it the obvious, or do you have to go a little deeper?
And do you know which was the audience that we missed completely in the recognition programs when we were designing? General managers. So we have, Atlantic Grupo has like a holding board, and then you have a general managers that are heading different big categories like coffees or beverages. When we were designing recognition programs, it was for people managers, for employees, for the sales, for the purchasing, for everybody in a certain way, but we didn't plan anything specific for general managers, assuming, you know, these are general managers, I don't know what assuming. And we found out that they were really felt missed out, and they need some kind of recognition as well. It is not enough to get the bonus or the results are good. So this was interesting, yes.
It's a human need.
It is.
People.
And then it was an interesting discussion with me and the board, and they would say, look, but that's a senior person. I don't need to put that. I said, yeah, of course you need to.
Not just
We
about
have
the
to
money.
find a way. But this was for us interesting because we had programs for all kinds of, except for those. Yeah.
I think one bit I'd just put in there is the way you ask the question is quite endemic of how a lot of companies work in many cases. So when we find something we can measure, we immediately turn it into another KPI.
Yeah.
And I always wonder how many KPIs you can have in this world. And we try and accelerate the reporting of that number right up the organisation so that the people at the top can see we're focusing on it. I prefer to work the other way around. So at the very senior level, I'm quite comfortable that the measure is employee engagement. It's simple, it's easy, people generally get into it because it's got face validity. What I can then do if I measure something like recognition is I can use that as an empowering tool for managers.
Yeah.
So I can get the HRBPs to go to them and go, look, you know you are measured on employee engagement, that's the thing that helps us. Let us give you another tool that's helpful for you. But rather than reporting it right up the organisation, I would concentrate on that group of management population and use it as something they can use. And I think that's really empowering. And it's a great way that HR helps the organisation rather than just being seen as trying to catch you out with yet another new measure.
I also think it's important to realize that recognition is one of the drivers. It's
Absolutely.
a major driver of engagement, but it's not the only driver. And today there's so many companies out there that say, oh, we're an engagement company, we do this, we do that, and it really is not. I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, we spoke yesterday, and one of the first things I did when I joined the company is we did a very detailed analysis of employee engagement within our organisation and within our sector. And we said, what are the key drivers? And we ranked them in order. And, you know, inevitably, there's hundreds of things that drive it. But we did just go, you know, these are the 4 or 5 really big buckets that in our company and in our sector drive engagement. We will focus on that. And yes, we know there's lots of other things we could do, but actually they're all so insignificant at the macro level. We'll just do those. And I do think sometimes organisations go for every new idea that can move it a bit, without going, what are the really big stones that could move this along?
absolutely.
And was the recognition one of them?
Yeah, well reward in general, of which recognition is a key bit for us, is quite high. And again, in a sales commissioned organisation, that is not surprising. But equally, I've been in organisations where I know it would be much further down the line. And I agree with you, in that case, that's where people are wasting hundreds and thousands of pounds turning a dial that probably isn't going to do anything.
You know, the analogy is a car. If we have children and they reach the age of 16 or whatever the driving limit is, and they want to drive your car, you would never give them the keys to your car. You would make them go to school, driver's ed, theory, practice, get a license, and now you can drive my, well, in your case, expensive cars. So. and what we're doing, okay, is literally we're building these solutions, all right, these systems that have a large part of it, the major cost, or the reward piece, the gift cards, the points, or the merchandise. And we're flipping the keys to the manager and saying, go, take it. And some of them don't know how to drive it, how to use it, and some of them overuse it, attaboy, 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 and it's doing nothing. And people think that they're actually being, gamed, all right? And you have the people that are in the zone. We need to get managers in the zone, and we need to make sure that people are educated about how to use this as a strategic tool. We need to create cultures that attract people, that retain them, and engage them. And recognition is a huge factor in doing that, can be.
And it's one that, given how many companies it shows up as a key driver, it tells you what a systemic problem it is. For something to be a key driver, it means you need to have some people who are bad at it, and that them being bad at it is associated with employees being disengaged.
65% of employees don't feel valued, don't feel appreciated. That's from the Gallup organization. If we, as providers, were a licensed profession, I think most providers would be up on malpractice charges because, quite frankly, a lot of what they're providing doesn't work.
Are there any other challenges that organizations face when putting in a recognition program? The pressure on engagement, overlooking that.
For us, one particular challenge was rising the bar and then rising the expectations, and then you could not necessarily follow up until the end. I will give a concrete example. So one of the best feelings for the younger professionals, or people that work between 2 and 4 years of experience, they could apply for a program, and they worked on the project, being mentored by the top manager and as well as the senior manager in their line organization. And to them, they felt really recognized, and then they worked on the project, presented it to the senior group of people, and they were really delighted. They felt recognized. That was really cool. And then when the program finished, which lasted for a year, approximately between 9 months and 13 months, they were going back to their jobs, and they lacked that kind of recognition that they had really intensively during these 13 months. And we could not provide it with the same intensity afterwards. Right. And we had some of them leaving after that experience because it was as of a feeling of how this could be every day, and then you could not follow up on that one. So this is one thing that we had a challenge. And another one, when it comes to recognition, as I said before, it was very important that the colleagues nominate the colleagues. However, the quality of this nomination over time, when you had to describe why you do that, was declining, and then you had to do the refreshment. So these are the two challenges that we are kind of having and are trying to find our ways around, not necessarily fully successful yet.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have a question? I'll open it up to the audience. Anyone? Questions on recognition programs?
That means that we were really boring. Luckily, there's a question.
Hello. I do have a short question. My name is Maria. I'm working for a telecom company, and our company is full of millennials. So our average age is about 31, and we do have a lot of people that are expecting a lot of things about you were saying something about raising the bar. What do you do when you have, employees that start taking things for granted because you did your best in implementing rewards and recognition programs, and then after a while they say, okay, but I deserve this, so what's next?
We had the challenge. I worked for a telecom company for 8 years in Croatia, and they were a startup company then, and their approach to that one was giving really huge salaries in comparison to the market average. And then after a few years, of course, you could not have this sustainable thing, and then it was, they were put at a certain level, and with quite a few perks, and which was compared to the market that was not as developed. But people inside, and there were lots of people, young people, who did not work elsewhere or had a quite limited working experience elsewhere, and they had to have a kind of reality check. So what we did, we organized with some other companies an exchange program. So they had to go in another company. It was usually a different sector, so we could not agree on the telecom. They went to the service, so it was hotels, or they went to the fashion designers, and they spent 3 months there, and they coming back, which was kind of also giving some times of reality of what the world looks like elsewhere. So this was one of the approaches we used. I guess everybody has. It did work to some people. It never works to all. I think it did open their eyes, and they did realize that the grass is not necessarily greener, that they get a different picture, and that this is something that they could, balance it out. So to quite a few people did work, but not to all.
I think the other bit that we've done is it's who drives your recognition scheme. So we've talked about reward that the company gives, and yes, that motivates some people, but can get into it becomes part of the package. And to be honest, I've experienced even the same with peer-to-peer, that over time that becomes that people expect it, and you get a lot of reciprocal recognition between people. What we've done in many cases is we've put the recognition in the heart of the customer. So it is customers that drive our recognition schemes, and they are very good at self-regulating that it doesn't become simple and standard. Everyone has a very differing degree of what exceeded their expectations, and that's what drives it. And actually, if you put it empowered of your customers, which is a hugely good thing to do, if slightly complicated at times, but if you do that, there's no danger of it becoming something that just becomes a default. You really do have to go above and beyond to get customers to drive the scheme for you.
Yeah, I think as well that what you need to do is have a strategy for your program. Absolutely. Why does it exist? I mean, if it's just a recognition program to make people feel warm and fuzzy, it's going to end up being what I call recognition roadkill, because it's not going to last. It's going to be looked at as an expense, not an investment. You need to have a clear strategy. That strategy has to link up with business mission, vision, values, or business objectives. And it can't be just there for the long term. You have to go back, you have to revisit it so it stays fresh, so that it's not just the same old program. It's always got to be updated.
Another small thing that worked for us, for quite a big number of benefits, we said that employees had to participate in a certain percentage. And there was a huge difference if it was given away for free in a total amount, or whether they had a choice to participate, and then you would kind of double or triple or 4 times their initial investment. They appreciated it, or they were aware of it more. With the benefits that we were giving for free, they just after a certain period of time, they didn't even remember. They just took it for granted.
And you need leaders that walk the talk.
Oh.
You cannot just have these programs exist and here HR, go manage them. You need leaders that walk the talk. If they don't do that, your program is in peril.
And I think, to echo that, the key bit is in all cases the CEO.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it is absolutely critical. I'm very fortunate that all the CEOs I've worked with have been very good. The one I'm with at the moment in particular is rated in the top dozen CEOs for People Focus by Glassdoor in the UK, above companies like Facebook and Amazon. And you have to have that level of buy-in. If you don't, then to be honest, you might as well not bother.
I see we have one more question.
Yeah, thank you. My question is related to what else about recognition, because sometimes we can have very good programs, recognition programs, but I face 2 kind of barriers. One is the communication. So if we have good programs, but we do not market those programs or brand those programs inside the organization so people don't know them, it's like we are not doing anything, right? And the second problem is that sometimes we centralize too much the recognition programs without taking into consideration the local cultures. and local needs. And sometimes it's very difficult, let's say in an Asian culture, to accept recognition programs that are built in the United States, right? So did you face those challenges, and how did you manage it?
So from my perspective, there's a number of best practices. Number one is having the strategy. Number two is having management buy-in. Number three is having measurement. Communication is one of the key things. And I think that when you have a recognition budget, you need to take some of that money and you have to put it aside to communicate the program to your employees. And it's not just a one-time thing. You've got to have a regular a communication plan that goes out for the life of the program from that budget, so that you're constantly going out and poking people about it and letting them know about it. I also think that one size does not fit all when you're talking about globally. What works in North America definitely doesn't work in certain countries in Europe and in Asia. We fool around, we talk about in Europe, the beer drinking companies and the wine sipping countries, because there is a big difference. You go to France and how they treat people and how they use these programs, or you go to Germany, or here in Ireland or the UK, it's completely different. You've got to be culturally aware of what works and what does not work. Team recognition, individual recognition.
And even division recognition can be quite
Absolutely.
different.
I was going to say, it's even in my company in particular, job role makes a massitive difference. And this is all communication.
Totally
we have lots of corporate functions that sit in front of a computer, and in which case an intranet's very easy, or a Yammer conversation. We have people in call centres where you want a Twitter hashtag that's much more useful, but actually I've got thousands of technicians who work with tools in their hands. And for those, we produce a mail shot and we drop it through their letterbox.
Something different.
Absolutely.
That absolutely is the best way to communicate with them, and it's having that full array of those things at your disposal. But I completely agree on the point that if you've got 100% invested in the programme and none in the communication, that's a waste of time.
One size does not fit all. I know from my perspective, being in this industry for 30 years, the only thing that most of my clients have in common is they're all unique. And we need to treat companies like that.
We actually once had to send the letters at home to their homes, because we have lots of salespeople on the field and lots of production workers. And even though we have kiosks and intranets and those, it was not working. So we were combining sending the personal letters at the home address to make the point. But I agree, the biggest mistakes we made in any kind of recognition programs were made because we did not adjust the communication, and we just assumed that it was enough to maybe repeat it twice, but then it took some time.
That's a great point. Well, let's recognize our panel with a big round of applause. Thank you.